Routes. Item 7.1 is a presentation respecting emergency detour routes. I ask John Murray to please come forward. Good day, sir.
Good morning.
Mr. Murray is not available?
I am David Ferguson. I'm Superintendent of Traffic Engineering.
Fair enough. Just
I'll
wanted
be
to
doing the presentation this morning.
Okay. Good day, sir.
So, good morning. Before I begin our presentation on emergency detour routes, I just want to recognize that we have some other staff in attendance this morning from the Ontario Provincial Police and Hamilton Police Services who have been integral to bringing us to this point to present this presentation to you. So what is a detour route and the emergency detour route? It's a designated and signed route that provides assistance in guiding motorists around an unexpected closure. And primarily the most common one, of course, is motor vehicle collisions, and we have to close the highway down. So what these signs do, it'll provide motorists with a guide to get off at one ramp, and it'll direct them to get back onto the highway at the next available ramp. An EDR route is not used for construction activities. That is a completely separate process that takes place. Our corridor management group is responsible for reviewing those and issuing permits. Currently in the City of Hamilton, we do have designated EDR routes, primarily for the Lincoln Alexander. We're currently reviewing the Red Hill Valley Parkway. We're currently reviewing the signage placement, and we expect to begin installation of the EDR for the Red Hill Valley this year. The Provincial Highway Network, the QEW, and Highway 403, there's nothing currently in place. As a result of a number of incidents that I'm sure many of you are familiar with over the past year, we've recognized that designating EDR routes throughout Hamilton is something that is required. However, with our unique situation of having a provincial highway through the west end of our city and essentially cutting the core in half, something that is very unique and is difficult to really address. A working committee was established with MTO staff, the OPP, Hamilton Police Services, and Traffic Engineering. And the chart below is information provided between 2005 and 2013. This is information provided by the MTO itself, and we've reviewed the data. Primarily on the QEW, there's been a total of 41 full closures, 51 for 403. And you can see I've broken it down. This Niagara bound listing should actually be Niagara at Brantford bound, obviously for 403. And in total, the average length of closure exceeds over 4 hours. And you'll notice the 403 is a little bit longer. And I've also broken down how many times the closures exceeded that average, as well as the total number of closures that exceeded 8 hours in total. So what currently happens when a closure occurs is that the OPP will be dispatched and emergency services will be dispatched to that closure or to that incident. The police will close off the highway at the nearest available interchange, and essentially traffic just filters now through our city streets. There's no signage, there's nothing to help guide them around. And there's been a number of reports or complaints from the public about trying to get through the city itself. It's not so much a case of the residents who don't really know what to do. Obviously, we're familiar with our road network. We're able to navigate throughout the city to get to where we want to go. But it's primarily for those who aren't familiar with our city. And in some cases, if you're following or relying on your GPS unit, if it's like mine, it actually makes you do a U-turn and takes you right back into the closure. So it can cause some confusion. Part of this, the delays, recently we received some complaints and emails from the general public, and some of the residents were complaining how they were stuck in this closure for a period of over 6 hours in total. So what is under review? The working committee has agreed that there is a need to establish an EDR route for the QEW and Highway 403. The preference with the Ministry of Transportation is, as I mentioned earlier, is to take vehicles off one interchange and get them back on to the next available interchange. I'll refer to this as a short emergency detour route, and I'll explain that a little bit more as we go along. You've also been provided in your handouts copies of the actual short EDRs. One of the things that we identified because of how unique our municipality is, and specifically for Highway 403, there's a need to establish a long emergency detour route, one that will take traffic around our city on roadways that are more beneficial for operations and safety, to help to remove traffic from our local road network and be able to provide assistance in guiding those motorists around our city. We've also asked the MTO to consider including Highway 403 on their Compass system, which is their freeway management system. It includes the changeable message board signs as well as video detection. So what are the proposed routes? As I mentioned, we've provided you with copies of the short EDRs, which will remove vehicles from one interchange and return them to the next. However, the one that we are most interested in is the two long-distance EDRs. And the primary route is a removal at Highway 52, up through 5, back down 6, completely removing traffic, or trying to remove traffic from the downtown core area. Secondary one would be the Link and Red Hill Valley Parkway. That way, again, we figured in reviewing the closures, there are incidences that occur on 403 again, between Highway 6 and the QEW, and this first one, the Highway 52, wouldn't really address traffic congestion. So the alternative would be to take them out through the Lincoln Alexander, down the Red Hill, back to the QE, and be able to again get back onto the QEW Toronto bound. For these routes to be effective, it's our feeling that inclusion into the MTO's Compass system is a great need. There's a need to be able to provide information to the motorists as they're approaching the area, so those signs are integral to the effectiveness of the long emergency detour routes. Part of that, the MTO has also requested council support of all the routes, the short routes, the long routes, as well as requesting inclusion into the Compass system. So this is the map, essentially, of the priority long emergency detour route, which shows you how the vehicles would exit at Highway 52, come across 5, and then back down Highway 6, as well as the reverse pattern. One thing with this is these are primarily MTO routes, so they're not utilizing city roadways. And this would be implemented for any closure that occurs, especially between the Link and Highway 6, which is, as you go through your maps for the short detour routes, you'll see they're quite comprehensive and difficult to maneuver traffic through those areas, and often creates a lot of congestion. And of course, this is the secondary route that utilizes the Link and the Red Hill Valley Parkway. Again, this will help us detour traffic around our city without having to use the local roadways and be able to access the QEW. So the impacts of the routes and our goals for the EDR, obviously the impacts, regardless of what we decide on in terms of short distance routes or even long emergency detour routes, it's going to create congestion on our roadways, unfortunately. The only way to get around that would be to have a free flow secondary highway, similar to the Link and Red Hill Valley Parkway. That gives us our best opportunity to encourage free flow movement. But the Red Hill and the Link currently operate close to capacity as it is. So we're still going to have congestion issues. The goal is to identify the most efficient and safe route to direct motorists around a closure anywhere within the city as part of the provincial highway network. And as I mentioned, detoured traffic will cause significant congestion and delay on Hamilton's chosen detour routes, as well as the adjacent roadways when people get off those routes and they try to maneuver their way through the city themselves. So our next steps is staff are going to continue discussions with the MTO. We've had a number of meetings over the last 7 months with MTO, OPP, and Hamilton Police Services. We've essentially come to an agreement that the routes that are before you today are appropriate. Like I mentioned, we do require council support and approval to move forward with those, as well as including the variable message board signs. Implementation itself would be expected to be completed within 1 year once we do receive a council approval. And the costs associated with the signs, the ministry prepares all of those and provides those. We can assist with installation. That is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson. And we have Councillor Ferguson as the first questioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dave, great last name. This is long overdue, through you, Mr. Chairman. Everything has taken too long to get to us. Closures on 403 are awful, particularly found. I hope, Mr. Chairman, I'll be able to ask the OPP some questions after I finish with Dave. But they seem to be weekly now. And I know last week on Twitter I was criticized for not being at a GIC meeting because I was sitting out in that darn highway. And it's so difficult to get off. And if you're warned earlier to get off at 52 and over to 5, which is, major arterial roads, it would get them off the sitting in a big traffic jam on the highway. Plus, it just plugs up Ancaster too, because everybody, when they see they're in trouble, exits at Wilson Street once it backs up to there, and plugs up Wilson, plugs up Garner, and I know 5256 is a long way around, but recognize we have a technical problem that we got this little thing called an escarpment that sort of limits what we can do. And so my first question to you, Dave, is what should the resolution date say today? That we support the concept of an EDR on 52, 5, and 6? Is that what you're looking for?
That's correct, through you, Mr. Chair. That is correct. We're looking for support from council to approve those long emergency detour routes, as well as support and request to the Ministry of Transportation to review and include message board signage along the 403 to provide that information to motorists before they actually get into the downtown area.
Okay, I'll make that resolution.
Well,
you can back to me later.
My apologies. I should have mentioned at the beginning, Councillor Collins has been working on a motion that the clerk is presently printing out, which will address a number of these issues. So he is presenting it at the appropriate time.
Okay, I would like to read that then, because I want to make sure
it will be distributed accordingly.
For Ancaster and Ward 12, because it does plug up roads. Can I pose a question now to, I see the OPP are here.
Absolutely.
And I keep talking to our chief about it, and he says, you got to talk to those guys at the OPP. So this is my chance.
Good day, sir.
Morning. Can you just identify who you are then, sir?
My name's Staff Sergeant Matt Peever, Burlington Detached and Ontario Provincial Police.
Okay. Staff Sergeant, I've noticed the frequency seems exponentially. Have you noticed the same? And I think the stats play that out, but what's your feeling about the number of frequency, particularly eastbound, where we seem to be having more and more accidents on that part, particularly coming down the escarpment?
Yes, we do, especially this past winter. The winter has been quite havoc, but the traffic has increased and the incidents occur involving dangerous loads sometimes with vehicles, commercial vehicles, and it just takes time to clean up.
And so, to you, Mr. Chairman, in your professional view, is it because they're going Is it because they're going down a grade? Is it because we got significantly more traffic on that highway now? What are the reasons why you see we're suddenly seeing a significant spike in the number of major collisions?
I believe it's the traffic. It's very much higher than it was 10 years ago. And a lot of it also on drivers. They don't seem to be adjusting to traffic conditions. Traffic's heavy. They don't slow down or they follow too closely. And as soon as something happens, we have a chain reaction and creates problems.
Okay, and the question I get asked constantly by my community, because I represent Ancaster, who come down that hill every morning, is they seem to feel, and I agree with them, that you're taking up. Is that because the insurance industry has put pressure on the police to gather more information at the scene because of a legal decision? But you seem to be taking hours and hours and hours to reopen after a collision rather than getting it cleaned up as expeditiously as you can.
If it involves personal injuries or fatalities, yes, it would take much longer because we have to gather evidence, be more specific for court purposes. We require people coming from different areas of Highway Safety Division with their expertise, traffic reconstructionists. And once we're finished, it takes a while for the cleanup crew to get there, depending on the circumstances. Sometimes if it's a major fire, we have to get the MTL to re-asphalt the roadways because you just can't drive on them. Heavy-duty equipment for tractor-trailers takes a while to get there, and sometimes these tractor-trailers are loaded with different goods. We have to be careful how we unload them, and so forth and so on.
But you've always had those problems, but in the last 3 to 4 years, it seems you're taking a lot longer. Have you enhanced or are you taking longer now because of pressures to investigate these things more before you actually open it up to traffic, or is that just coincidental?
There are circumstances where we have to be more specific. We were 10, 12 years ago for court purposes, especially if we lay criminal charges. We have to have our ducks in a row to make sure everything is looked after, and it just takes longer.
Okay, is there anything we as a member of council can do to help you clean these sites up a little quicker, or any kind of resolution to Attorney General or to the Commissioner of the OPP or to elected officials to help us get these sites cleaned up more expeditiously?
I know the command staff at OPP are always looking into these matters, and they're having discussions with the Minister of Transportation. And to give the exact answer would be more appropriate for those individuals to answer these questions at the highest level.
Okay. Just, you got to do your job. I get that. But the community is really watching this and questioning it and questioning us. And I assume you're getting, some sort of correspondence also.
Definitely from the community and from Ford company, like major Ford company or major industries where they have to get their vehicles, their parts on time, and we're trying to open as fast as we can. And I agree with you. There's pressures from the community, from major companies, from everyone.
Is there anything we can do to prove that?
Correct?
Is there anything City Council can do to help improve that?
Something like that would have to be answered by my superiors exactly, because I don't know the discussions they're having with the ministry or they're having with the government officials right now, what committees they're on. So something like that would have to be addressed further with my superiors.
Okay. Thanks you. And through you again, Mr. Chairman, back to Dave Bohr. I don't see anybody from transportation planning. Is anybody here from transportation? There was a resolution that council passed 2 years ago asking the MTO to add a third lane downbound.
Okay, before you ask the question, who's here from transportation planning?
Here, there's no one here from that division, so I'm going to look to John with his knowledge. Maybe he can help out on the question. Thanks.
Okay, John, there was a resolution passed by this council 2 years ago asking the ministry to consider widening 403 to 3 lanes downbound. And with 2 lanes to the link and 2 lanes to the 4 lane, there's 4 lanes pouring into 2. It congests there every morning. And I wonder what kind of progress you've made. The resolution stated they could widen into the median so they wouldn't have to go into the escarpment to avoid any environmental issues. There's a wide median there now with guardrail on both sides. It traps a lot of garbage. So you put a tall wall down the middle and some storm sewers, then widen to a 3rd lane to relieve this congestion. Is there any update that the community can get on that issue?
Through you, Mr. Chair, without having the specific details of it, I don't want to commit too much to an answer on that. I do know that during our conversations with the ministry through this process, there's been no indication from them of any intent to add another lane, certainly in the short term. But we could go back again and revisit that with them. I'm not aware of council's resolution, so I can go back and update that with
Council,
staff.
you're certainly aware of it. And so maybe you could get us a consent item report back to us what the status of that resolution is.
Certainly. And if I could just add, I mean, it's the support of this. I think work here today will go some way, at least, in terms of trying to improve that situation.
Okay, and last question, Mr. Chairman, through you back to Dave, and you can deflect this question to Paul or anybody else you want to. Why is there no cameras up there yet? Compass cameras, MTO cameras. Most people have TVs in their bedrooms now when they're getting ready and they have the news on and pay attention to those cameras where there's congestion or problems and can adjust their schedule or adjust their route accordingly. Why have the MTO, because of the significant spike in the number of accidents and closures, haven't installed cameras on that, in the link intersection in particular, so viewers and radio stations can inform the public where there's problems by using these valuable resource, and we seem to be ignored on this.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have had discussions with the MTO on that. They are similar in nature as municipal governments where they have so much budget monies to work with, and obviously they review all their provincial highway networks and where to spend those monies. They have stated that it was not part of their 10-year capital program. However, through our committee meetings and discussions, it is something that they are willing to take a look at, and one of the reasons why they have requested that motion from City of Hamilton Council so they can begin further review to implement.
Okay, I haven't had a chance to read this motion yet. I don't know if it includes the cameras. If not, I may amend it. But what are they called? Is that the Compass system?
That's part of their Compass system, yes. So the Compass system is a freeway management system and incorporates a number of things. Obviously, the variable message board signs. It includes the video detection or the video streaming that you would see on CHCH News.
Or go online and look at it.
Yeah, that's right. Or it also includes, it goes back to their headquarters where they have staff that are reviewing the monitors and the highway network to be able to implement the changes and place up the signs and information on the
No question it's a helpful system. We just need it installed at the link to help voters make the right decision. Okay, I'll make sure that's included in the resolution, Mr. Chairman, and I'll have a chance now to read it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Councillor McCaddy.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks very much, Dave. As always, great presentation, fantastic work. I wonder if you could just take me through the Ward 1 implications for the detour route, because we do, as you know, we've got a lot of the exits in Ward 1, Main Street, Aberdeen Main Street, and I guess I'm thinking of downbound. Seems to be a lot of the accidents, as Councillor Ferguson indicated. Just where traffic would go under the system you're proposing here, Mr. Chair, through you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Actually, if you give me just a second, I can put it up on the screen here for you. So this is the short detour routing for the 403. And it'll start in the Brantford area, working our way back towards Hamilton. As you can see how I was talking about, it takes you from interchange to interchange. So this is just an example of that. This is from Garden Avenue to Highway 52. And 52 to Wilson. Staff, when reviewing the routes, tried to identify the most appropriate and safest routes. This is an example here where vehicles would come off Wilson. Essentially, the shortest route would be actually bring them up Shaver, I believe that is, but we didn't feel that was a safe route to actually take, so we've brought them out further to utilize the route and bringing them back on by Highway 6. As you can see here, once we get into this area, it starts becoming a little more difficult and to get vehicles around the area. This would be for a closure between the new Highway 6 and the link. We'd bring them out around the city back down to Lincoln Alexander to get them back to the 403. This one here is a detour route utilizing the link back down to Aberdeen. As you can see now, we're starting to get into the local road network and into the areas where we have a lot of vehicle operations. One of the things we've discussed at our committee meetings is once we get into this area, this is where the long emergency detour routing really needs to start being implemented. Rather than encouraging to get into these local roadways. As you see here, and now we get down in sort of to the west end, the core area here. This is from Aberdeen to King Street. You know, if you're taking a lot of highway volumes and pushing them onto these roadways, it's going to create a lot of congestion and a lot of frustration towards motorists. So that's
Mr. Chair, I wonder if I could just ask Dave to go into some detail on this one, because this is sort of the core area that does see a lot of the problems. Maybe just looks like coming off Aberdeen, the eastbound one, for example. The blue, is that, and is that Longwood, or just maybe take me through where that goes?
That's right. It's going to take you down, back down to Main Street, and connecting you back onto the highway at King Street to bring you back onto the 403. As well as vice versa. It's going to take you off at Main, bring you all the way back around King Street to bring you back out Longwood and Aberdeen to access Highway 403. So if you can imagine the highway traffic trying to utilize that route, that's why it's important for the long EDR. One of the discussions we've had is that these sort of more local routes or EDRs would be implemented during very short time period closures where emergency services are able to come in. They expect to get the road open quickly. This could be implemented, or during off-peak hours. So either late at night, early morning hours when traffic volumes are much lower. We're not going to create a lot of congestion and issues that way.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, I'm still pretty confused by this because I'm just trying to think of the, currently if we get an accident, chaos reigns and people come off wherever they come off and they go wherever they want to go. And the neighborhoods in Kirkendall and, the area that I represent are just chaos. And I mean, so far, I've commiserated with people, but I don't know what I can really tell them. And it doesn't look like what we've got here is that much different than what happens in practice now. Am I right? Probably one of the only benefits might be that we can actually guide people to take this road instead of this road. Currently, they might just go wherever they feel like it. But these accidents occur any time of day, and it's unclear to me how we can get people to use a route at a certain time of day. People are going to use it whenever the accident occurs. Is that not the case? It could be, 12 noon when everything's very busy already. I'm just trying to understand the benefit, or not the benefit, because I think there's probably an overall benefit for the city for the motorists that are moving through Hamilton on the highway. But how is it going to help in the neighborhood?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So if we look at it, and we'll just use numbers to make it a little easier. If the highway is carrying, let's say 50,000 vehicles an hour, and an incident occurs, if we're able to implement the long EDR, we're able to implement the message board signage, we're hoping to educate the motors or provide information to the motorists well before they get into this area. So currently those 50,000 vehicles are using these, we'll say the EDR routes to get around a closure. Hopefully going forward now, we're able to cut those volumes down to a third. So, we're providing information early enough to the motorists on the 403. They then begin using the long EDR routes. So maybe now those 35,000 vehicles are now using the long emergency detour route rather than these short routes. We're always going to end up in the situation where vehicles are caught within that area and they're going to have to utilize those roadways. There's no way to avoid that. And as I said before, the primary purpose of EDR routes within our municipality is to provide information to the motorist that doesn't know our city, to help them get around. Those that know the city, we're going to find our own routes and work our way around things.
Okay, well, that helps, Dave. And just the last question, Mr. Chair. Following up on Councillor Fergus's comments, MTO was here a couple of weeks ago, and or perhaps it was even our last meeting, and I asked them about the expansion of 403 downbound that between Ancaster and the West Mountain and the area that I represent. And I think if I understood the answer correctly, they were referring to the larger Niagara highway that we used to call it the Mid-Peninsula Highway, that would occur during that period of time, which is, I think, a long period of time. So is that your understanding as well, or anyone else that's here who may have had conversations with MTO? Is there, and John's going to follow up on it, I guess, based on Councillor Ferguson's question, but because that's not the answer we want to hear, that it's tied into the Niagara Road, because that's a long time into the future. We're looking for a shorter term. Short's probably 10 years in MTO thinking, so a short-term solution on this. Anything to offer us from your knowledge, David, or anybody else?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, with my experience, I've had the opportunity to sit on the Niagara GTA corridor committee meetings. It is my understanding that there is no plans at this time for expansion of the 403. It's been included as part of the Niagara GTA review and their EA process. But at this time, I have not seen anything or heard anything with respect to expansion of 403.
Well, that's really good to know, Mr. Chair, because that gives us the signal that we need to focus specifically on that 403 issue rather than the much larger issues that it sounds like it's being tied up into. So that's our task to focus on that. Thank you. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Councillor McCaddy. We have no further questionnaires, so therefore, moved by Collins, seconded by Ferguson, and we received the presentation, and I appreciate your time, Mr. Ferguson. Thank you. All in favor? Carried. Now we go to motions on this particular item. Councillor Collins, you have a motion.
I do. It's moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Ferguson, that staff be directed to negotiate with the Ministry of Transportation for the approval and installation of supporting traffic signage for emergency detour routes in the City of Hamilton. Part B of the recommendation states that staff be directed to request that the Ministry of Transportation install variable message board signs at locations to be agreed upon by staff from the City of Hamilton and the Ministry of Transportation to enhance the effectiveness of the long emergency detour routes during incidents on Highway 403, and Part C, that staff be directed to request the Ministry of Transportation to include Highway 403 through the City of Hamilton in the Compass Freeway Traffic Management System in order to improve incident management and public notification. That's been seconded by Councillor Ferguson.
Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, I'd like to move an amendment to add a C, and I look for Dave just to coach me if this is the right words. Where'd he go? A D, yes. And the D part would read that staff advise the MTO the city supports long EDR for Highway 403 using Highway 52, Highway 5, and Highway 6. I can get a second to that, then I'll check with Dave to make sure. Well, first of all, Dave, is that okay? Is that what the message you
That's
need?
seconded by Councillor Collins. Dave, on that
Through you, Mr.
question.
Chair, yes, that would be acceptable.
Okay.
Okay. All in favor? Carried. Moving on to
Got the
7.
main motion yet. That was
Oh.
the amendment.
On the, sorry?
That was the amendment we just voted on. You got to
We're going to move that up. Yeah. So on the main motion?
vote on that.
Oh, sorry, yes. On the main motion, all in favor?
Carried.
Now, moving on to 7.2.